two curious apes stumbled onto a pile of rotting fruit on a forest floor around 10 million years ago, and evolution had already rigged what happened next. The species that would eventually build breweries, throw toasts at weddings, and invent the regretful morning after text message didn't choose alcohol. Alcohol chose it first, using nothing but a broken gene and the smell of garbage. Start with the part that doesn't add up. Ethanol, the exact compound sitting in every beer, wine, and cocktail on the planet, is a poison. Cells that sit in it too long start to die. The liver treats it as an emergency, burning through it specifically because leaving it in the bloodstream causes damage. Nearly every other toxin an ancient ancestor might have swallowed by accident triggered disgust, not desire. So, why would alcohol break that rule? Why would any brain evolve to crave a molecule built to hurt it? The answer starts on a forest floor, long before there were hands around to hold a glass of anything. Fruit that falls from a tree and sits in the heat doesn't just quietly rot. Wild yeast colonizes the sugar inside it almost immediately, and as that yeast feeds, it produces alcohol as a waste product. That waste product happens to be extremely volatile, meaning it evaporates fast and travels far on humid forest air. A fermenting mango is not subtle. It broadcasts itself across enormous distances, like a free advertisement for a pile of free calories. For a hungry ancestor moving through dense canopy, that scent was information. It meant sugar. It meant food had already ripened and fallen, no climbing required. It also meant a race, since birds, insects, and other ground-feeding animals could smell the same signal, and fallen fruit does not last long once every hungry creature nearby knows where it is. The individuals who could smell that signal from farther away, and who could actually eat the fermented fruit without getting violently sick, had a real advantage. Suppose two closely related ancestral apes come across the same patch of fallen fermenting fruit. One eats it and thrives on the extra calories. The other eats it, gets poisoned, and spends the day sluggish and exposed to predators. Guess which lineage evolution kept around? In 2014, a team led by biologist Matthew Kerrigan tested exactly how this advantage worked by comparing a liver enzyme called ADH4 across dozens of primate species, including humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas. ADH4 handles the first step of breaking ethanol down before it builds up to dangerous levels. In most primates, this enzyme is almost useless against alcohol. It processes it far too slowly to matter. But in the shared ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas, right around 10 million years ago, the researchers found a single mutation that made this enzyme roughly 40 times more efficient at breaking ethanol down. 40 times is not a small tweak. It is the difference between an ancestor that got dangerously drunk off a few bites of overripe fruit and one that could eat a full meal of it and keep functioning well enough to walk, forage, and stay alert to danger. That single genetic accident unlocked an entire food source that had previously been off limits. It also lines up almost perfectly with the moment some of these ancestors started spending more time on the ground instead of in the trees, since fallen fruit collects on the forest floor, not up in the branches. Not every enzyme in this story tells the same tidy tale. A different variant in a second enzyme called ALDH2 slows down a later step in processing alcohol for a portion of people alive today, mostly in East Asia, producing the familiar flushing and nausea some people feel after a single drink. Some researchers suspect that variant stuck around precisely because it discouraged overconsumption, a built-in speed bump installed on top of an appetite that had already switched on 10 million years earlier. So, the appetite came first, and the tolerance came first. What about the actual pull? The craving itself. This is where biologist Robert Dudley's drunken monkey hypothesis comes in, and its core idea is uncomfortable for anyone who thinks of alcohol as a purely modern invention. Dudley argued that the reward humans feel around alcohol is not a coincidence and not cultural. It is a leftover survival circuit. Once the scent of fermentation reliably meant food for 10 million years straight, brains got wired to treat that smell as a signal worth chasing, the same way the smell of something baking pulls a person toward a kitchen today without any conscious decision involved. The pleasure was never built for parties. It was built as a homing beacon for calories. Wild chimpanzees at a research site in Guinea have been observed, repeatedly and deliberately, dipping leaf sponges into naturally fermented palm sap and drinking it, sap that reaches an alcohol content close to 3% entirely on its own. A team of primatologists led by researcher Kimberly Hawkins documented this as routine behavior across multiple seasons, not a one-time accident. Nobody taught these chimpanzees to enjoy alcohol. Which raises the obvious next question. If the craving is millions of years old, when did anyone actually start making the stuff on purpose? For a long time, the working assumption ran in one direction. Humans settled down, started farming grain, ended up with more of it than they could eat, and someone eventually noticed that wet grain left sitting around could ferment. Beer, in other words, was a happy accident of agriculture, something that showed up after farming, not before it. Archaeologists working in a cave in what is now northern Israel found something that complicates that timeline. Stone mortars there show starch residues consistent with brewing a beer-like fermented drink dating back roughly 13,000 years, produced by hunter-gatherers who had not yet domesticated grain and were not yet baking bread anywhere in that region. The order runs backward from what most people assume. Some researchers now argue for what's been called the beer before bread hypothesis, that the desire to reliably reproduce a fermented drink may have been one of the pressures that pushed hunter-gatherer groups toward the far more labor-intensive project of deliberately planting and tending wild grasses in the first place. Agriculture, on this version of events, was not invented to feed people bread. It may have been invented, at least in part, to keep a party supplied. That reframes the entire arc. Civilization's most demanding technological leap, farming, may have been chasing an itch that started with a distant ancestor sniffing out spoiled fruit on a forest floor. Somewhere between the fallen mango and the stone mortar, an ancient homing beacon for calories turned into deliberate brewing, then into ritual, then into the specific modern experience of a stranger buying a round at a bar. The mismatch is worth sitting with. That ADH4 mutation was shaped by an environment where alcohol showed up in small, irregular doses, a lucky windfall of overripe fruit here and there, gone again within days. Fallen fruit in the wild typically ferments to somewhere around 1 to 4% alcohol. A modern distilled spirit can sit at 40% or higher, a concentration that never once existed anywhere in the environment that built the craving in the first place. Nothing about 10 million years of evolution prepared a human brain for breweries on every corner, delivery apps that bring alcohol to a front door in under 30 minutes, and marketing engineered to trigger that same ancient reward circuit on command. An alarm system built to get excited about finding one good piece of fruit is now going off constantly in a room stocked with an open bar, and it has no idea the rules ever changed. None of this makes alcohol some kind of secret survival food today, and it isn't evidence for anything beyond how deep the wiring runs. It's a reminder that the craving showed up first, fully formed, millions of years before anyone had a reason to brew, distill, or bottle anything. Humans did not invent a taste for alcohol. They inherited it from an ancestor whose only goal was finding calories before the competition found them first, and who happened to get very lucky with one broken gene. So the next time a drink gets poured at a celebration, there's a strange lineage sitting underneath it. Not a brewer, not a monk in a monastery perfecting a recipe, an ape on a forest floor. 10 million years ago, following a smell straight to a pile of spoiled fruit and walking away, thriving instead of sick. Everything that came after, the mortars, the vineyards, the toasts, was just humanity slowly getting better at recreating the one thing its own biology had already decided it wanted.